Blog viewers, today on a Saturday I'm going to try to do 3 blog posts, 3 video posts, and get kind of collecting various thoughts over the course of the week. And I just want to do them all today, so they'll all be somewhat short. In this first one, I want to talk about or argue that parenting, the decision to have a child, is a gamble, and it's a very, very large gamble, probably one of the biggest gambles you can make. But it's not typically viewed as a gamble or approached as a gamble, but more as a sort of risk-free proposition that for many people is viewed entirely as a good and innocent, positive thing. But I want to argue that it's a huge gamble and that there are many, many risks involved with that decision that people need to think very carefully about before they have a kid. Off the top of my head, I was able to do this in about 40 minutes. I think this is by no means complete, but I listed off at least 11 or 12 very large risks involved with having a child. And these include, first one, whether the child will be healthy, free of physical and mental diseases. You don't know that. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you have the right stuff to be a good parent, mentally, physically, etc., emotionally. Whether you will even survive to make it to see a child's adulthood. Again, you don't know these things. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you will have the financial resources to support a child for nearly 2 decades of life. Again, you don't know these things. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether your relationship, marriage, or whatever, however you structured this thing, will survive 2 decades of a child growing up. Again, you don't know this thing. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you can overcome certain vices of character that would seriously jeopardize your ability to be a good parent, your moral stature as a parent. Again, you don't know these things. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. 6, whether your child will be able to avoid the treacherous path of drugs, alcoholism, and perhaps STDs. You don't know these things. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you will have the time and energy over many years to devote to properly raising a child. You don't know this thing. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you will ultimately respect and admire the grown child's personality and behavior. Of course, you will always love the child, but you may not always admire or respect his or her behavior. Again, that's uncertain. You don't know it. It's a gamble. Whether the child, number 9, whether the child will grow up in a decent culture, one not permeated by violence, money worship, racial, ethnic, and other forms of prejudice and other forms of stupidity. You don't know this thing. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you will ever have a mature adult relationship with your child, or rather one that will always be one where both persons are always hiding something from each other. Again, you don't know this thing. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. Whether you will remain physically close to the adult as he ages, as he or she ages, or whether you'll be relegated to the occasional phone call, or more likely in today's day and age, text and email. Again, you don't know this thing. It's uncertain. It's a gamble. So, because childhood takes nearly 2 decades, you really can't be certain of any of these 11 things I listed, and there's probably way more. So there are at least some 11 very large risks involved with parenting that you can't predict. That is the very definition of a gamble when you go into something like this and you don't know at all what's going to happen. Not only that you don't know as the huge dimensions of the undertaking, what's going to happen. You have no idea. And I think what happens is for many women, and to a lesser extent men, hit their mid to late 30s in a panic that they have yet to have a child. The panic is driven by the sense that having a child is this purely good and guaranteed to be good thing, without serious risk or complications as to whether in the end the decision to have a child in one's particular some circumstances is a good one, or whether parenting itself will be a good venture for you or one that you're capable of undertaking. Now, this belief is utterly foolish because, again, having a child is a huge, uncertain gamble, not a slam dunk, sure thing, good thing. What we need is not panic, but when one hits a certain point of age as to whether one has had a child or not, but serious reflection as to whether one and one's partner is willing to assume such a huge gamble of parenting, for what reasons, and what will be done to reduce the risk. On this last point, why take on all this risk? For what purpose? Why take on this huge gamble of parenting? Why do it? If you're going to take such a big gamble, it's clear that it is one, why would you do that kind of thing? Well, there's a couple explanations, all of which are somewhat defective. You could say, well, you want to ensure the human species, doesn't die out. That's kind of ridiculous when there are 7 billion species members. You could say, well, and by that I mean whether or not you have a child, there are 7 billion others that will likely have one, or a large majority will have one, so the species is in no danger of dying out. Another reason could be ensure your personal genes don't die out. Well, that's a pretty selfish reason that's a pretty selfish reason to bring another creature into this world. That can't really be worth this kind of gamble. You could say you have the desire to bring a prodigy or a genius into this world, or something of that sort, an exemplary human being. Well, that's a 1 in a million kind of thing. Effectively, zero chance that you will give birth to a genius or prodigy. So that doesn't really seem to be justifying the gamble. And so, if you're particularly deluded or narcissistic, or always think that what you do is amazing, you might imagine that your child is a genius or a prodigy, but you will be pretty alone in this assessment. So that can't justify it. So I guess I can't find a compelling reason to take on this ultimate gamble of parenting, other than if you really believe that you can't predict these risks, but you believe that you will do everything you can to deal with these situations as they arise with your partner, and you believe this to be absolutely something that will help you and your partner in developing, and will be you believe you can do a good job for the child, and that you will make it through all these risks. And that you think that in the end this will develop, overcoming these risks and overcoming whatever happens will in the end develop you and develop your partner and develop the child in a good way. That might be the only reason that I could see. But there's also many other ways that you can develop. You don't necessarily have to have a child to take on this task of self-development or fruition. There's many other ways that might involve far less gambles and less injury to another developing human being if you don't get it right. Because if you, let's say you take a trip around the world with your partner, self-develop and self-realize yourself or whatever, and it doesn't go well, you wasted some of your time and your partner's time. But if you have a kid with the same desire and it doesn't go well, then the consequences are obviously much greater, and to another person that didn't do anything to deserve that kind of thing. So those are my thoughts on parenting as a sort of gamble. It should be understood as a gamble, should be understood as fraught with risk. It should not be conceptualized or imagined as this just guaranteed good thing that everybody should do.